U.S. economy loses more jobs than expected. Lack of confidence and the economic recovery led employers to shed a more than expected 85,000 net jobs in December, even as the official unemployment rate held at 10%. The rate would have been higher if more people had been looking for work instead of leaving the labor force because they can't find jobs. The sharp drop in the workforce, 661,000 fewer people, showed that more of the jobless are giving up. And once people stop looking for jobs, they're no longer counted among the unemployed. So, in reality, the U.S. unemployment rate is much higher. When discouraged workers and part-time workers who would prefer full-time jobs are included, the so-called underemployment rate in December rose to 17.3% from 17.2% in November. That's just below a revised figure of 17.4% in October, the highest on records dating from 1994. Many economists had hoped Friday's report would show that the economy had gained jobs for the first time in 2 years. While the revised figures found an increase in November, it was tiny. One word sums it up: disappointment. The drop in the labor force tells us that Main Street doesn't believe there's a recovery yet because they're not out looking for jobs yet. Revisions to the previous 2 months' data showed the economy generated 4,000 jobs in November, the first gain in nearly 2 years. But some of that could be because of holiday temporary hiring. But the revisions showed it also lost 16,000 more jobs than previously estimated in October. The participation rate in the labor force, the portion of adults either working or looking for work, fell in December to 64.6%, the lowest since August 1985. The drop was particularly steep in the second half of last year. That suggested that people were becoming discouraged about their job prospects, even as layoffs slowed. The reason is that job openings remain far too few. The U.S. labor force has shrunk by 1.9 million people since May. Without the drop, December's jobless rate could have been as high as 10.4%, according to the president of the Economic Policy Institute. And some economists think the rate will near 11% as more job seekers eventually stream into the workforce. And on top of all this, the population of the United States is still growing. So, in reality, or in effect, you must have job creation, not job destruction, to have a real economic recovery. Friday's report caps a disastrous year for U.S. workers. Employers cut 4.2 million jobs in 2009, and the unemployment rate averaged 9.3%. That compares with an average of 5.8% in 2008 and 4.6% in 2007. Nearly 15.3 million people are unemployed, an increase of 3.9 million during 2009. The economy is in a rough situation. Labor Secretary Hilda Solis acknowledged in an interview. She said she thinks companies are reluctant to ramp up hiring because they're waiting to see what new stimulative steps the government might take to provide relief. More stimuluses. On Friday afternoon, President Barack Obama plans to announce more government spending to create green jobs. The White House says Obama will unveil projects that will help develop solar and wind power and energy management technologies. The funding is part of the $787 billion economic stimulus package Congress approved last year. Obama is also expected to repeat the administration's call for an additional $5 billion in spending for clean energy manufacturing. Congress would have to appropriate the additional money. Congress, meanwhile, is considering a jobs bill that would spend another $174 billion on unemployment benefits, roads and other infrastructure, and provide support for cash-strapped state governments. The House approved the legislation on a party line in late December. The Senate is expected to take up the measure this month or maybe next. The U.S. economy has lost more than 7.2 million jobs since the recession began in December 2007. And while layoffs have slowed, they haven't ended. UPS said Friday it will cut 1,800 jobs, and defense contractor Lockheed Martin Corporation said this week it's cutting 1,200 workers. If jobs remain scarce, consumer confidence and spending could flag, slowing the economic recovery. The economy will need to grow faster to bring down the unemployment rate, and economists worry that much of the recovery stems from temporary factors such as government stimulus efforts and businesses rebuilding inventories. Still, some economists said a recent trend of improvement remains in place. In other words, it could have been much worse. The economy lost an average of nearly 700,000 jobs in the first 3 months of last year, a figure that dropped to 69,000 in the fourth quarter. And the private service sector added jobs for the second straight month, although the gains have been concentrated in temporary workers who are much easier to shed. Firms are still being very cautious, so the first thing they're turning to aren't full-time employees, but temp workers. Companies have added some 166,000 temp workers since July. The average work week remained unchanged at 33.2 hours, near October's record low of 33. Most economists hoped that would increase, as employers are likely to add hours for their current employees before hiring new workers. And again, there's something much more going on here. These are times like never seen before, and will never be seen again. Everything that must change for the better. The system of things must change, because real change is needed. And all these things are more signs of the end times transition days. There is an ongoing, continuing transition, which is a process happening daily all around the world. And there are many kinds of signs.